Just sign here, Loretta. It's only a delivery receipt, Rachel said with that tight-lipped smile of hers, already turning away before I'd finished uncapping the pen. I signed. I always signed. The next morning, I found a letter slipped under the door of my garden unit. My house had been sold. Not theirs. Not ours. Mine. Sold, sealed, and signed. By me. And this wasn't the first time she handed me a page that cost me everything. They didn't expect me to read. Not at 78. Not with bifocals, stiff fingers, and a hand that still trembled after my fall last winter. They thought the world had gotten too fast for people like me. Maybe they were right. But the world hadn't knocked the sense out of me yet. That morning, I stared at the notice. Thick cream paper, embossed logo, polite legal cruelty. The house had been transferred to Graham McKinnon and Rachel McKinnon as of the previous Tuesday. My name, Loretta Ann McKinnon, was now only listed under prior title holder. The kettle clicked off behind me, but I didn't move. The letter rested on the chipped laminate counter like a slap I hadn't seen coming. I looked around my little garden flat, the one we'd called the Granny Suite, tucked behind the main house like a secret. 2 windows, low ceilings, and a damp smell that wouldn't leave. I'd agreed to move in here 6 years ago. It made sense then. Graham needed space for the kids, and I didn't mind the quiet. "It's just temporary," he'd said. "You'll always be home here, Mom." I believed him. That first year wasn't so bad. I had the garden. I baked with Sadie and hung their laundry out to dry because Rachel insisted the dryer shrunk her jeans. I was still useful, still seen. But slowly, subtly, things changed. Rachel stopped knocking before coming in. Graham started handling my mail to help. The groceries I paid for started disappearing upstairs. My doctor's appointments were rescheduled without asking. I thought it was care. Now I see it was control. And then the papers began. Little forms. "Sign here so we can pick up your meds. This is for insurance. Nothing major. Delivery slip, just routine." The pages were always turned toward me, pen ready, distractions built in. The toddler crying, the dog barking, the dinner bubbling over. I signed because I trusted them. And now I saw what I'd done. The main house wasn't mine anymore. The very walls Graham was born in, the porch where I nursed my husband through his final weeks, the windows I'd washed every spring, gone. I walked stiffly to the old filing cabinet, hands numb. I opened the top drawer and pulled out my will. Dated 2008. Back when I still held the deed. Back when I was still someone people respected. Rachel appeared that afternoon like nothing had happened. "Just need your signature on one more thing, Loretta. Delivery confirmation for the cleaning service. I'll leave it here." She tapped the paper on the table, barely meeting my eyes. My hand hovered over the pen. "Is this like the last one?" I asked. She blinked. "What?" "The one that sold my house." Rachel laughed, too quickly. "Don't be silly, it's just logistics. You know how these companies are. Forms for everything." I looked at her, really looked, for the first time in a long time. "I think I'll hold off this time," I said, my voice even. She frowned, the mask slipping for a second. "Fine. Suit yourself. It's just going to cause delays." After she left, I unfolded the paper she'd left behind. It was not a delivery receipt. It was a voluntary termination of occupancy agreement. If I'd signed it, I would have agreed, willingly, legally, to leave the property within 30 days. And they would have had every right to evict me from my own backyard. I set the paper aside. My hands were still shaking, but not from weakness, from rage, from betrayal. I hadn't fought through 2 jobs and a husband's cancer and raising a son alone after 40 to be quietly erased in my final decade. I hadn't spent 60 years being the backbone of a family to be shuffled out like old furniture. No, I would not go quietly. Not this time. The guest house had a sloping ceiling that made you crouch near the window, and in winter, the wind slid under the door like a stray animal. But I hadn't complained. Not when they moved me in. Not when they forgot to bring the space heater for the first 2 winters. Not even when Rachel started using my fridge for overflow groceries. The truth is, when I moved out of the main house, I thought I was being helpful. I told myself it was just a shift, not a loss. "It's still your home, Mom," Graham had said, his arm around my shoulder. "This is just so the kids can have their own rooms. You'll have your own space, your own entrance, everything you need." I nodded, smiled, packed. I gave him the master bedroom, the kitchen I had remodeled with my own hands, the dining room where I'd served Christmas dinner for 27 straight years. I moved into 480 square feet that used to hold garden tools. They called it the cottage. I called it what it was, the shed, repainted. The day I moved in, Rachel brought me a bottle of lavender air freshener and a tin of oatmeal cookies from the store. "To make it feel cozy," she'd said. I remember smiling and thanking her, like that made it all okay. I still had the key to the main house. For a while, I came and went freely. I made dinner twice a week, helped with the laundry, folded tiny socks. But over time, things started to disappear. Not objects, access. The door lock was changed. "Just a safety upgrade," Rachel said. I had to knock, then I had to call ahead. Then they stopped answering my calls altogether when I asked to come by. Eventually, I stayed in my cottage. I wasn't banned, not officially. But the message was clear. This part of the property wasn't mine anymore. My house was up there. My world was down here. I still had my garden, though. They let me keep that. Every spring, I dug up the earth, planted marigolds, tomatoes, green beans. I liked the dirt under my nails. It reminded me that I was still here, still making something grow. One afternoon last fall, I came outside to find my garden boxes moved, just dragged to the other side of the yard. I stood there, clutching my trowel, confused. Rachel came out with a coffee in hand. "Oh," she said, noticing my face. "We needed space for Sadie's new swing set. Hope you don't mind." "The sun's better over there anyway." She didn't wait for my answer, just went back inside. I didn't fight it. I moved my plants again. I bent down in the cold and replanted everything, knowing full well most of it wouldn't survive the shock. But I did it anyway. Because that was easier than confrontation. Because I'd been trained to be grateful for crumbs. I still remember the first time I noticed my bank account looked different. It was a year and a half ago. A routine check on my tablet, which Graham had insisted on setting up for me. He said it would be easier to keep all my apps and info in one place. I saw transfers I didn't recognize, regular round numbers going out every month. I asked him. "Oh, that's the new property tax structure," he'd said. "It's all automated now through my account. Don't worry, I've got it." My own son explaining to me how my money worked. I didn't push then. I told myself, he's just trying to help. He means well. They're busy. They're tired. You're lucky to be close to them at all. I realize now, that was the moment I began to disappear, piece by piece. It wasn't one big event. It was paper cuts, quiet erasures, death by 1,000 little kindnesses with strings. I watched Sadie grow up through the window. She used to come down every morning to say hi on her way to school. Then she didn't. I watched them repaint the house last summer in a color I hated. No one asked me what I thought. It didn't occur to them to ask. Now I know why. Because I didn't own the house anymore. Because they'd been preparing for this for a long time. That afternoon, after Rachel tried to trick me again, I sat in my garden and stared at the house. My house. It looked the same as ever. White shutters, rose bushes under the front window, Graham's car in the driveway, but I could feel the rot under the paint. I went inside and opened the drawer where I kept my old documents. I hadn't looked through them in years. Birth certificates, my marriage license, Derek's death certificate, and the deed to the house, dated 1982, both our names. Loretta and Derek McKinnon. I held that page for a long time. Somewhere along the way, I had trusted my son more than I trusted my own instincts. That was about to change. Graham wasn't always like this. I remember the boy with grass-stained knees and a wild crown of blonde curls, always building forts out of couch cushions and yelling that he was protecting the castle. He hated carrots, but loved puzzles. When Derek died, Graham was 26 and still calling to ask how to boil rice. He used to come by every Sunday after church, even when he moved across town. "You shouldn't eat alone, Mom," he'd say, unwrapping paper bags of greasy takeout with a grin. That version of my son, warm, thoughtless, in the charming way, started fading the day Rachel appeared. Rachel Holloway. Law degree, perfect smile, black blazer even at barbecues. She wore heels to our first backyard dinner and checked her phone more than she looked at anyone. I tried not to judge. She was ambitious, that was clear. But something in her eyes set me on edge. They were polite eyes. Polite and cold. The kind that smile without softening. "She's just shy," Graham had said the first time I brought it up. I'd said nothing. I wanted to believe him. Rachel got pregnant quickly. The wedding came second. A courthouse affair, no family invited, just 2 signatures and a Facebook post. "We'll do a big celebration later," Graham said. It never happened. After Sadie was born, they moved in with me. I offered. It made sense. The market was terrible. Graham had just switched firms, and Rachel was taking maternity leave. "You have all this space," he said, eyes scanning the house like he was already dividing it in his head. "And we'll help out. Make it easier for you, too." He called it a win-win. At first, I liked having them around. The house buzzed again. I'd hear baby cries at 3 a.m. and smile, knowing life was still being made under this roof. I cooked, watched Sadie when they needed to run errands, tried to stay useful. But useful turned quickly into invisible. Rachel didn't like how I folded the laundry. "You don't have to do that, Loretta," she said once, already refolding it. "I know you're trying to help, but we have a system." She didn't like my chicken pot pie. Too salty. My television shows. Too dated. My advice. Too much. Graham changed slowly. At first, he defended me. "She's just tired, Mom. New baby, no sleep. You remember what that's like." But the defenses got softer. Then they stopped altogether. Then he started rolling his eyes at me, too. One night, I made lasagna. Real lasagna. Ricotta, fresh basil, homemade noodles. I spent the whole afternoon layering it, just like Derek liked. I set the table, lit a candle. It wasn't anyone's birthday. I just wanted to feel like a family again. They came in late. Rachel looked at the table, the food, the flickering candlelight, and laughed. "Oh, sorry. We already grabbed Ty on the way home. I didn't know you were cooking." Graham gave me an awkward shrug. "Next time, let us know." I sat down and ate alone. One plate, one glass, one candle. After they moved me into the guest suite, things got quieter. Less dinners, less talk, less space. Graham stopped calling me Mom. He started calling me Ma. Short, sharp, transactional. I transferred the utility payment from your account, Ma. Can you sign this form for the insurance, Ma? I'll be out all day. Don't let the plumber in unless Rachel says, Ma. They began talking over my head, around me, as if I was background noise. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. But the jokes stopped. The casual smiles disappeared. I was tolerated, not included. And Rachel, she sharpened. She never yelled, never raised her voice. She didn't need to. She locked the cabinets when I made suggestions about Sadie's snacks. She has allergies, she said, though she never told me what they were. She moved my rocking chair out of the living room without telling me. It didn't fit the decor, she explained. She rerouted my mail. It's easier this way since we're all under the same roof. Every action was framed as logic, convenience, efficiency. But it all pointed in the same direction. Control. And Graham? He let it happen. He signed everything she asked him to. Nodded through every dismissal. Looked away every time I winced. I remember the day he asked for access to my accounts. Just for emergencies, Ma, he said. You're getting older, and with all the scams out there, we don't want you to be vulnerable. That word, vulnerable, it tasted like poison. I said yes. Of course I did. I still loved him. I thought he still loved me. Now I know better. Now I know they'd been preparing for this day for years. The day I'd be so softened, so invisible, so grateful that I'd sign anything they put in front of me. Well, they miscalculated. The woman who built this home with her bare hands wasn't going to die in its shed. And the boy who used to call me his knight was about to find out just how sharp my armor still was. It started with the television remote. One day, it was in its usual spot, beside the armrest of the worn recliner I'd brought with me from the main house. The next, it was gone. I searched the cushions, the side table drawer, even under the rug. Nothing. That evening, when I asked Graham about it, he gave a vague shrug. I think Sadie borrowed it for her tablet, he said. She's always pressing buttons. I didn't believe him. Sadie hadn't come down to the garden suite in over a week. The remote was never replaced. A few days later, my television stopped turning on altogether. It's old, Rachel said when I asked. Honestly, Loretta, you could use less screen time anyway. Isn't it better for your eyes to read? She dropped a stack of Reader's Digests on my table like a hostess giving a child crayons. I smiled, nodded, said nothing. But inside, something shifted. Next came the mailbox, the one attached to the fence gate, where my mail had arrived faithfully for over 30 years. Bills, catalogs, birthday cards. But for 2 weeks straight, it sat empty. At first, I blamed the post office, then the weather. But one morning, I saw the mailman, Greg, same as always, walking right past it and slipping envelopes into a shiny new box at the main house. I called out to him from the garden path. Hey, Greg, did they reroute my mail? He looked confused. Didn't Graham tell you? He said you all wanted everything in one place. Easier that way. I stood there, heart thudding. Oh, right, I said. Thanks, Greg. Back in the cottage, I sat down and tried to remember the last piece of mail I'd actually opened with my own hands. My heart ticked like a metronome. There were things I used to see, bank notices, newsletters, the quarterly summary from my investments, but I hadn't laid eyes on them in months. I remembered Graham's words. We've set up paperless billing, Ma. Everything comes to my email now. That had seemed reasonable at the time. I didn't need to track every charge, but now I realized I hadn't seen anything real in far too long. My refrigerator had been slowly emptied, too. Not of food, I still had that. But little things disappeared. My favorite tea, the honey jar from Vermont, the jam Rachel once called too sugary. When I asked about it, Graham laughed. We've been streamlining, Ma. Less clutter, you know? But it wasn't just food. It was keys. One morning, I reached for the spare set I kept on the hook by the door. Gone. I checked the drawer where I kept duplicates. Empty. My stomach dropped. I waited until they were out of the house, then walked up to the front porch and tried the door. My key no longer worked. I stood there, hand on the doorknob, like a ghost trying to enter its old life. I didn't tell them I knew. I just walked back to my little house and closed the door behind me with care. I sat down in the recliner, without a remote, without mail, without a key to my own home, and folded my hands. My world had been reduced to 480 square feet. A garden view, a bed, a kettle, and silence. Even the photos on my walls felt different. Derek, smiling in his flannel shirt. Graham at 6, hugging a plastic dinosaur. I used to look at them with warmth. Now I looked with a hollow kind of ache. Like they were strangers I used to know. The worst moment, though, wasn't a missing object. It was the night I knocked on the main house door because the cottage circuit had tripped. It was dark, cold, and I had no power. I knocked. No one came. I knocked again, harder. Finally, Graham opened the door in his gym clothes, earbuds still in. "What?" he said, irritation already blooming. "I lost power," I said. "The heater won't turn on. Could you check the breaker box?" He blinked. "Now?" I stared at him. "Yes, now." He sighed. "I'm in the middle of a virtual session, Ma. Can it wait?" "No," I said quietly. "It's 37 degrees in there." He stepped out, annoyed. Rachel stood behind him, arms crossed, saying nothing. He flicked the box, muttered something about outdated wiring, and went back inside before I could say thank you. I walked home in the dark. That night, I sat at the table with a pad of paper and began making a list. Not groceries, not bills. A different kind of list. What I no longer control, my key, my mail, my power, my television, my documents, my money, not sure, need to check. My space, my voice in the house, my place at the table. I stared at that last line. It hurt more than all the others. When was the last time I was invited to dinner? Thanksgiving? No, they went to Rachel's sister's that year. Christmas? I ate here? Alone? Graham brought me a plate, on a paper tray. The truth settled in, bitter and precise. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't a host. I wasn't even a mother anymore. I was a tenant. One they were slowly evicting in everything but name. But that meant something very important, didn't it? It meant I was still here. Still present. And if I was still present, then I still had time. Still had choices. Still had fight. I closed the notebook, stood up and put the kettle on. They thought I'd gone soft. They were wrong. I started keeping my important papers in a biscuit tin. It was ridiculous, I know. I had a filing cabinet, neat folders, labeled envelopes. I had systems. But after the key disappeared, after my mail vanished, after Rachel's just sign this tricks, I began to realize that systems only work when no one else is rewriting the rules. So I took everything that mattered and tucked it into an old rusted tin, the one with the image of a red barn on the lid. I kept it on a shelf in the back of my closet, hidden behind a stack of unused quilts. Birth certificate, Derek's death certificate, our marriage license. The original will, 2008, signed and notarized, still legally valid as far as I knew. A list of account numbers, the last full printout of my bank summary from over a year ago. I'd forgotten how good it felt to hold paper in my hand. Cold, solid, mine. I'd taken the precaution after the night Rachel came down, wearing her best version of concern. "Loretta, we've been talking," she said, clasping her hands together like a schoolteacher preparing bad news. "You've got a lot of old documents cluttering your space. Tax stuff, bank statements, all that. We were thinking we could help you digitize everything. Much safer that way. Paper gets lost, you know." I nodded, smiled, pretended I didn't hear the click of the trap. "That's very thoughtful," I said. "Let me think about it." That evening, I checked my cabinet. 2 folders were missing, the one with my investment summaries and the one with the house title. I waited until they were asleep and went into the main house using the back door. Sadie always forgot to lock it when she let the dog out. Rachel's home office was immaculate, as always. Modern desk, neutral walls, a framed diploma from her law school, and a photo of her holding Sadie on a beach in Cabo. I stood there for a moment, trying to feel like I belonged. Then I opened the desk drawer. It wasn't even locked. There, underneath a stack of client files and a labeled folder marked Thornwood HOA, was a thin manila envelope with my name written on a sticky note. Inside, the missing folders. I didn't take them. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I photocopied them the next day at the pharmacy on 3rd Street. 40 cents a page. Best money I'd spent in years. That's when I saw it. On the last page of the investment file, Rachel had added herself as an authorized financial coordinator. The language was vague, but the implications weren't. It gave her the ability to manage, transfer, and consolidate assets for the benefit of the household. Not me. The household. The next day, I took a walk to the bank. I hadn't been in person since before the pandemic. Everything had gone online, automated, hands-off. But that morning, I walked right into North Valley Credit Union, pulled a number from the little machine, and waited. The branch manager was new, young, nervous. I told him I wanted to see the signature authority on my accounts. He blinked. "Of course, Mrs. McKinnon. Do you have your ID?" I handed it over. He clicked and typed and squinted at his screen. Then he smiled, uncertain, polite. "Looks like you're co-listed with Rachel McKinnon and Graham McKinnon?" My mouth went dry. "Since when?" He turned the screen a little. "The authorization was updated about 8 months ago. Right here." He pointed to a scanned document. It had my signature on it, except it didn't. It was close, very close, but not mine. I could tell. A hesitation on the capital L, a shaky loop in the middle of my last name that I never made. Rachel had tried, but she wasn't an artist. She was fast. My hands were trembling as I stood up. I thanked him. I walked home. They'd forged my name. Not on a will, not on a birthday card, on access to everything I owned. That night, Graham knocked on my door for the first time in weeks. "Hey, Ma," he said, his voice casual but a little too cheerful. "Rachel said you went to the bank. Everything okay?" I looked at him. Really looked. The boy with the toy dinosaurs was long gone. In his place stood a man with clean nails, dry eyes, and a quiet chill in his smile. "Everything's fine," I said. "Just wanted to check on my investments. You know how I worry." He chuckled. "Well, you don't need to worry. We've got you." Yes, I thought, like a bird in a cage. After he left, I sat at my little kitchen table and opened a fresh notebook. I labeled the first page, "What They've Taken." I wrote, control of accounts, house deed, access to mail, power of attorney, social security info, location of original will my name on paper. Then I made a second list. What I still have, my mind, my documents, copies, my biscuit tin, my memories, my resolve. I underlined the last one twice. This had gone far beyond overreach. It wasn't carelessness. It wasn't miscommunication. It was theft. Quiet, domestic, legally masked theft. I'd seen cases like this once years ago when I used to volunteer at the senior center. Women like me, widows, grandmothers, slowly cut out of their own lives by family members who called it help. Back then, I used to think, that could never happen to me. My Gram would never do that. But now I knew better. I had one advantage left. They still thought I was slow. Still thought I signed anything placed in front of me. Still thought I hadn't noticed. Let them keep thinking it. They'd see soon enough what a woman who has nothing left to lose is willing to do. Because I wasn't just planning to stop them. I was planning to take everything back. The morning Rachel came with the second document. The sky was cloudless, too bright for October. There was a faint smell of cut grass in the air, the kind that used to make me think of Derek oiling the mower before Saturday chores. I was trimming dead blooms off my marigolds when I heard the familiar clipped steps on the garden path. "Loretta," Rachel called, voice smooth as fresh paint. "Got a minute?" I stood up slowly, knees aching. She held a clipboard in one hand and a yellow envelope in the other, her smile already in place. "I was just about to make tea," I said. "Want a cup?" She hesitated. "Sure." Inside, I moved slowly on purpose. I filled the kettle, set the mugs down, opened the tin of shortbread she once called dry as chalk. She didn't touch the cookies. "So," she said, tapping the clipboard as if she'd only just remembered it, "this is nothing major. Just a routine form from the delivery service. We had a few packages dropped off last week and they need a signature confirming receipt." I sat across from her. "Packages?" She blinked. "For the house. Supplies mostly. Bulk groceries, some office things. You know how Graham orders everything in." I didn't. "No one told me anything anymore." She flipped the clipboard around and handed me a pen. "It's just a confirmation. You don't even need to read it if you don't want. All standard." That last sentence, it rang in my ears like a siren. "You don't even need to read it." I took the pen, but didn't touch the paper. Instead, I looked at her. Really looked. Rachel's hair was pulled into its usual perfect knot, not a strand out of place. Her nails were freshly done, dark burgundy. Her eyes didn't waver. She was good. Too good. I smiled gently. "Well, if it's standard, I suppose you won't mind if I take a moment with it." She tilted her head. "Of course. I just didn't think you'd want to fuss with all the legal jargon." "Oh, I do enjoy a bit of legal jargon," I said lightly, unfolding the paper from the clipboard. It wasn't a delivery receipt. It wasn't even close. The title at the top read, "Voluntary Termination of Occupancy, Secondary Dwelling." My pulse spiked, but I kept my face still. I read the fine print. It was short, just 2 paragraphs. Legalese dressed as kindness, but the meaning was brutal. By signing, I would acknowledge that my current residence, my garden unit, was no longer necessary for my quality of life, and that I agreed to vacate within 30 days to allow better utility of the property. I would also waive any claim to the premises or associated facilities, past or future. In short, I'd be homeless, with no right to complain. I looked up. Rachel was still smiling. She had no idea I'd seen the game. "You said this was for deliveries," I said, my voice quiet. She blinked. "It is." I flipped the clipboard around and tapped the title. Her face didn't change, but her body did. She shifted, just slightly, the way a boxer does when they realize they've walked into a trap. "Oh, that... Well, I must have brought the wrong page. That's an old draft. Graham had a few things printed for work. They must have gotten mixed up." I handed the clipboard back. "I see. Easy mistake." She reached for the pen, but I kept it in my hand. "I'd like a copy of this," I said. She hesitated. "Of course. Though again, that's not the one I meant to bring." "I'd still like a copy." Rachel stood, smoothing her skirt. "I'll print one and drop it off later." "No need," I said, rising. "I'll walk up and use the printer myself." "That's really not..." "I insist." We stood there, facing each other, the tea gone cold between us. Finally, she relented. "All right, Loretta. Of course." After she left, I didn't print the document. I scanned it, using the app my granddaughter installed for me last Christmas, and sent it to myself, to my lawyer, and to a new email I'd created that neither Rachel nor Graham knew existed. Then I sat back down, opened the biscuit tin, and added a new note to the top. "Attempted eviction. Signed document not delivered." Intent confirmed. It was the first time I used the word eviction. It tasted like rust in my mouth. That night, I sat in the dark and watched the porch lights of the main house flick on one by one. The motion sensor caught Rachel as she stepped out with her phone. She was pacing, talking fast. Her free hand moved in sharp gestures. She thought she was winning. She still believed I was slow, fragile, malleable. But here's the thing about women like me. We're underestimated for so long that people forget we ever knew how to fight. We cooked the meals, yes. We rocked the babies, yes. But we also handled the taxes, buried our husbands, survived recessions, mended roofs, learned how to work machines no one taught us to use. We watched entire eras rise and fall, and we're still here. I hadn't signed the document. That was the win that mattered. But this wasn't over. I knew now, without doubt, that they wanted me gone. Not someday. Now. Which meant I had no time to waste. The next morning, I made an appointment with someone who hadn't heard from me in over a decade. But someone who, once upon a time, told me, "If you ever need help, not the kind for a leaky sink, but the real kind, call me before you sign anything." It was time to see if he'd kept his promise, because I sure as hell was going to keep mine. The library on Main Street hadn't changed since 1984. Same pale green carpet, same smell of dust and ambition. The clerk at the front desk was new, early 20s, dyed blue hair, eyeshadow too bright for morning. She smiled politely when I asked for access to the public computers. "Sure, ma'am. Let me just log you in." Ma'am. That word used to mean respect. Now it meant fragile. I thanked her and settled at the far terminal, adjusting my glasses. My fingers were slower than they used to be, but they remembered how to search. Voluntary termination of occupancy, plus elderly plus legal validity. Elder eviction disguised as paperwork. Signs of financial abuse by adult children. Each click brought something familiar, like someone was finally saying out loud what I'd only suspected in silence. It had a name. What they were doing to me. Undue influence. Coercive control. Fraudulent conveyance. I printed articles, scanned legal definitions, took notes. I felt like I was cramming for an exam I hadn't known I'd be taking. But there was something satisfying in it, empowering, like I'd found a flashlight in a dark room. When I left, my bag was heavier than when I arrived. My chest was lighter. But I wasn't done. I took the bus across town to a little insurance office wedged between a barber and a bakery. The gold letters on the window read S. Pollard, Notary and Legal Services. Shirley Pollard had once been my bridge partner. She was now retired from court reporting, but kept a license to notarize and draft minor legal paperwork. She looked up from her desk, blinking in surprise. "Well, I'll be damned. Loretta McKinnon. I haven't seen you in 10 years. "I'm making up for it today," I said, closing the door behind me. She stood and hugged me like no time had passed. I didn't cry. Not then. But something loosened in my chest. We sat, and I unfolded the papers. Photocopies of the forged signature, the false occupancy form, the scan from the bank. I watched her face go from curiosity to concern. "This isn't sloppy," she said finally. "This is deliberate. I need to know what I can do," I said. Quietly. For now. Shirley nodded, already pulling forms from her drawer. "We'll start by drafting a sworn affidavit. You'll state that the signature at the bank isn't yours, that you never knowingly transferred your deed or authorized anyone to act on your behalf. If it comes to court, this protects you. Will it hold? It's a start. But more importantly, Loretta, you need a lawyer. A real one." I hesitated. She read my silence. "I'm not saying go to war. I'm saying get someone on your side before they move again." I thought of Rachel's polished nails, Graham's empty eyes. "I already made a call," I said, "to someone who used to help us with Derek's business taxes. He's still practicing." Shirley smiled. "Good. Then you've got a fighting chance." We filled out the affidavit. She notarized it. I slid the papers into my bag with care, like carrying a map out of a trap. Before I left, Shirley touched my hand. "Loretta," she said softly, "this isn't your fault. You trusted them." "I taught them," I replied. "There's a difference." Outside, the wind had picked up. I buttoned my coat. I wasn't naive anymore. Now I was preparing. North Valley Credit Union smelled like lemon cleaner and fresh ink, the kind of smell meant to say, "Trust us, everything's under control." I arrived 5 minutes before opening, sat on the wooden bench near the entrance, clutching a manila folder like it was armor. Inside were the notarized affidavit, copies of the forged signature, and a list of every unauthorized transaction I'd been able to piece together. When the doors opened, a young man with a name tag, Daniel, greeted me with a smile too wide to be sincere. "Good morning. How can we help you today?" I didn't waste time. "I need to speak with the branch manager, private office. This isn't teller business." Something in my tone made him straighten. "Of course, ma'am. One moment." 5 minutes later, I was seated across from a glass desk, facing a woman in a navy suit. Late 30s, sharp eyes, clipped voice. She introduced herself as Monica Alvarez, Client Services Director. I introduced myself the way my mother taught me, clearly, firmly, with eye contact. Then I opened my folder. "I'm here because someone has used my accounts without my consent," I said. "They've accessed funds, moved investments, and added themselves to legal documents using a forged signature. I'm requesting a full transaction history, immediate suspension of all outside access, and the initiation of fraud documentation procedures." Monica blinked. To her credit, she didn't argue. She took the folder, flipped through the first few pages, and said, "Let me pull up your profile." She typed, clicked, paused. I see that Rachel and Graham McKinnon are currently listed as joint authorized users on your main account, your investment profile, and your line of credit. Remove them, I said. We'll need written confirmation for that. I slid the affidavit across the desk. You have it. She read quickly. Her eyes narrowed at the signature comparison I'd included. This does appear inconsistent. No, I said. It appears forged. Monica nodded slowly. Understood. I'll initiate a hold on all joint activity pending investigation. That means no transfers, no authorizations, no access from their end until we resolve this. Do you want to place a temporary freeze on the accounts entirely? Yes. Everything but my personal checking. I still need to buy groceries. Monica typed more commands. I watched the screen turn red in a few corners. Flags, holds, alerts. For the first time in months, I felt my chest expand. Control. It was subtle, but it was mine. When she finished, she handed me a receipt with a reference number and a copy of the freeze order. I also recommend you set up a new account, she said. Fresh routing, no linked users. We can move your pension and Social Security to that one, so it stays untouched. Yes, I said. Do it. We filled out paperwork. I chose the password myself. Not Graham's birthday, not Sadie's middle name. A word no one but I would know. Before I left, Monica asked, Do you plan to pursue legal action? I thought of Rachel's clipped tone, Graham's quiet betrayal, the slow theft of my home, my space, my voice. I'm consulting an attorney, I said. For now, I just want a clean line between them and my life. Monica smiled. A small one. Respectful. You're not the first mother who's walked in with this kind of story, she said gently. But you're one of the few who came in early enough to do something about it. I left with new documents, a new account, and a strange, bubbling quiet inside me. Not peace, not yet. But something sharper, clearer, resolve. Back at home, I made tea and sat at the table. My phone buzzed. Rachel. I let it ring. A second later, a text. Hey, Loretta. Just checking in. Can we talk? Nothing urgent. Let me know when's good. Polite, breezy, watching. I turned off the phone. Let them wonder. Let them scramble. I had my money back. Next, my name, my house, everything. Howard Ellison hadn't changed much in the 20 years since Derek and I first hired him to handle our estate planning. Still bald on top, still wearing that same tired brown suit that made him look more like an accountant than a lawyer. But his mind was sharp as ever, and more importantly, he remembered me. Loretta McKinnon, he said, standing to shake my hand. I was just thinking about you last week. Must be something in the air. Or maybe, I said, settling into the leather chair across from him. I've finally got a reason to come back. I placed the folder on his desk. He didn't open it right away, just looked at me carefully. You all right? He asked. Not as a formality, as a man who'd seen the worst in families. I'm angry, I said, and I'm ready. That was enough. He opened the folder, began reading, slowly at first, then faster, page by page. When he reached the copy of the deed transfer, he stopped. Do you remember signing this? He asked. I leaned in. I remember being handed a form Rachel said was for a home insurance update. Just a signature, she said. It was that page. His lips pressed into a thin line. It's not just a transfer, he said. It's a quitclaim deed. You surrendered your rights to the property, Loretta, fully, voluntarily. But I didn't know that, I said. I didn't read it. I trusted them. I believe you, but the paper doesn't care what you believed. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. Here's what we're dealing with. You signed a legal document under false pretenses. If we can prove you were misled, intentionally or through coercion, we have grounds to challenge the transfer, especially if there's a pattern of manipulation. I pointed to the forged signature from the bank. There's your pattern. He nodded. And this document, I said, sliding out the voluntary termination of occupancy, was the next attempt. I didn't sign it, but if I had, they would have been within their rights to evict you, he finished grimly. We sat in silence for a moment. I want it all back, I said finally. My name on the deed, my accounts clean, my independence, all of it. You can get it, he said, but it won't be fast. They'll fight, especially Rachel. This smells like her handiwork. I don't care if it takes years, I said. I just want the process started. He pulled out a legal pad. We'll need a sworn statement detailing every interaction related to the documents, times, dates, witnesses if possible. I'll file a motion to void the deed based on fraudulent inducement. If we can show that you were led to believe it was something else, we have a shot, especially with the bank signature already under review. What about the house in the meantime? I asked. Can they make me leave? No, he said. Not unless they formally serve you an eviction notice and go through the court, which, given everything, would be very unwise on their part. I'll send them a cease and desist letter today. That should hold them off. I exhaled. The knot in my chest loosened, not gone, but bearable. Howard, I said, standing to leave. Thank you. You're not the first mother to walk into my office with this kind of mess, he said gently. But I'll tell you what I told the last one. The minute you walked through that door, you stopped being their victim. Outside, the sun had shifted. Brighter now. A little warmer. I held the door open a moment longer, feeling the breeze on my face. The game had changed. They'd taken my house. Now I was taking it back. The cease and desist letter arrived at the main house 2 days later, delivered by certified mail. I watched from the garden window as Rachel stood on the porch, envelope in hand, expression unreadable. She didn't knock. She didn't come down. She didn't smile for 3 days. I kept waiting for Graham to appear, to stomp down the path in his old sneakers, face flushed, voice full of outrage or apologies. But he didn't. Not even a text. Silence had become his specialty. Howard worked quickly. By the end of the week, we had filed a formal petition to void the quitclaim deed. It would take time, months maybe, but it was a start. He also sent notices to the Title Insurance Office and the local Property Records Bureau, alerting them that the deed was under dispute. You're on the radar now, he said during our second meeting. They can't sell, refinance, or transfer anything without getting flagged. Good. I spent the days in quiet motion. I sorted every paper I owned, making 2 new copies of everything. One went to Howard, the other to Shirley, in case anything ever happened to me. I updated my will. Rachel and Graham removed entirely. The house, if returned, would go to Sadie. Not her parents. Not even a trustee. A direct transfer on her 25th birthday. Until then, managed by a third-party fiduciary. Shirley called it poetic. I called it justice. In the meantime, I made changes they wouldn't see coming. I had the lock on my garden door changed. Quietly, professionally. A locksmith I found in the classifieds. Cash only, no paper trail. I'm not supposed to do this unless you own the property, he said, squinting at the frame. I do, I said. Or I will again soon. He didn't ask questions. Then I bought a small safe. Not a fancy one, just something heavy enough to make someone think twice. I placed it behind the loose panel in the closet, and stored the originals inside. The real documents. My ID. The notarized statements. The new will. Rachel had access to many things. She would not have this. At the library, I learned how to monitor my credit. I set up alerts, new passwords, froze every unused account I could. I changed my email. I bought a burner phone. Shirley laughed when I told her. "You're running this like an op," she said. "It is," I replied. "They've been running one on me for years." The strange part was how peaceful it felt. Taking back control didn't feel like a war. It felt like gardening. Quiet, methodical, patient. One root at a time. Pull, clear, protect. Then came the confrontation. It was evening. The sun had dipped low behind the house, casting the garden in soft shadow. I was pruning the rose bush by the back fence when I heard footsteps. Graham. He didn't come often anymore. I suspected Rachel told him to stay back. But here he was, hands in his hoodie pocket, eyes tired. "Hey," he said. I didn't respond right away. I trimmed another stem. "You changed the locks." "Yes," I said. "You froze the accounts." "I did," he sighed. "We were just trying to make things easier, Ma." I turned to him. "For who?" He shifted. "Look, I know it seems bad, but it wasn't meant to be like this. Rachel she's good at paperwork. She said it was safer if everything was in our name. For taxes. For planning. For control," I corrected. He didn't deny it. "I trusted you," I said, not loudly, but with weight. "I didn't know she was going that far," he said. "I didn't see the documents until after she'd filed them." "Then why didn't you undo it?" He had no answer. "I raised you better," I said simply. That seemed to land. His face twitched, just slightly. "I didn't come to fight," he said. "Then don't." We stood there for a moment, the quiet pressing between us like fog. "You're going to court?" he asked. "I already have." He nodded. She's not happy. She will be less happy soon." He looked down. "I guess I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. That might have meant something once, but not now." "Then say it to the judge," I said. "Not to me." He left after that. I finished trimming the roses. Later that night, I made a new list in my notebook. What I've reclaimed. My accounts. My legal representation. My documents. My access. My voice. It wasn't the end, but it was enough to sleep through the night. And I did. For the first time in months. I submitted the complaint on a Tuesday morning, typed it myself, printed it at the library, walked it into the Department of Elder Protection Services, and handed it over to a woman with careful eyes and a clipboard full of forms. Her name was Tasha. She read the first page, then looked up. "Did you file a police report?" "Not yet." "Do you have documents?" I handed her the envelope. Deed copies, the forged signature, the bank statement, the notarized affidavit. She skimmed. Her jaw tightened. "We see this more than we should," she said quietly. "I'm not here for statistics," I replied. "I'm here to reclaim what's mine." She nodded. "You'll get a case number within 72 hours. You'll be assigned an investigator. In the meantime, document everything, every conversation, every change in behavior. If they retaliate, call the non-emergency line immediately." I left with a receipt and a folder full of rights I'd forgotten I still had. That afternoon, I sat in the garden, notebook open, when someone called my name. "Mrs. McKinnon?" I looked up. It was Jack Landry, my neighbor for over 2 decades. Retired firefighter. Wore a belt like it was armor. He stood on the other side of the fence, holding a manila envelope. I didn't want to get involved, he said, but I heard them yelling the other night. Rachel, on the porch. Something about lawyers and how dare she. You were already inside, I think. I stood. What else did you hear? She said they moved too fast, that you woke up too late. Graham told her to calm down, said it was just a temporary setback. Then something about fixing it quietly. I wrote it down. He handed me the envelope. Inside, a sheet of yellow-lined paper covered in neat block letters. Dates, times, words. It was everything I needed. Will you be a witness? I asked. His answer was immediate. Yes. Men like Jack don't speak unless they mean it. He tipped his hat and left. Back inside, I called Howard. He picked up on the first ring. We've got a neighbor willing to testify, I said, and an open case at Elder Protection. That speeds things up, he said. Keep that witness close and document every contact. Already doing it. There was a pause on the line. You're moving fast, he said, with a hint of admiration. They taught me to be quiet, I said, but they forgot I was paying attention the whole time. That evening, Rachel came down, not with documents, not with smiles, with fury dressed as civility. Loretta, she said, voice like a blade wrapped in linen. We need to talk. I opened the door, said nothing. She stepped inside, looked around like she was seeing the room for the first time. This is getting out of hand, she said. We never meant for this to turn into a legal circus. You forged my name, I said. That's not... Graham handled that. I wasn't... You brought me a form to sign, knowing it would evict me. That was a misunderstanding. No, that was a strategy. She swallowed. We can work this out, she said, privately, without dragging Sadie into it. My chest tightened at the name. My granddaughter. She's already in it, I said. She's watching. She's learning. Rachel's face shifted, just slightly. A flinch. I'm not backing down, I said. You'll get your notice soon, from the court, from the state, from the banks. It's all coming. She stepped back. Color drained from her cheeks. You think anyone's going to believe a confused old woman? I smiled. I'm not confused anymore. I closed the door behind her. Then I sat down and wrote everything she'd said, word for word. When the knock came an hour later, I was ready. It was Graham. He looked tired, older than his 39 years. Ma, he said. She told me what happened. And? He rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't know about the forged signature, I swear. She handled the paperwork. I went along. You let her. I know. Then you'll let the court handle it too. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. But Sadie would. One day she would know the whole story. And I wanted it to be the truth. The letter came in a white envelope with a gold seal and too much polish. I found it tucked into the garden gate early that morning, no postage, hand-delivered. My name was spelled correctly, at least. That told me Rachel hadn't written it herself. The return address belonged to a law firm downtown. One of those firms with 3 names and no soul. Hargrave, Tiller, and Bell. I opened it with steady hands. R.E., property dispute, 1171 Orchard Lane. The language was practiced, cold, confident. They acknowledged my concern, asserted that the deed transfer had been executed legally and in good faith, and advised that continued attempts to interfere with the ownership rights of Rachel and Graham McKinnon may constitute harassment or elder defamation. I read it twice. They wanted me scared. They wanted me grateful for their patience. I folded the letter, placed it in a new folder marked Threats, and called Howard. He was already expecting it. "They're playing the first card," he said, "which means they know they're holding a bad hand." He drafted a response the same day, factual, restrained, sharper than anything in Rachel's kitchen. In it, he detailed the affidavit, the ongoing investigation, the witness statements, the financial control patterns, and the likely forged signature. He closed with one sentence I read 3 times over. "Any attempt to threaten, manipulate, or isolate Ms. McKinnon further will be documented and presented as evidence of continued coercion." I smiled. Let them keep writing letters. I was writing something too. That week, I kept to my garden, planted chrysanthemums, moved my rocking chair to face the yard. I didn't hide. I didn't speak first. I just was. Rachel stopped looking at me. Graham avoided the window entirely. One afternoon, I saw Sadie sitting on the back porch, chin in her hands. She didn't come down, but she waved. Small, unsure. I waved back. I wondered how much she understood. Children see more than we think. They feel the tension in the walls, the silence in shared meals. One day she'd ask questions, and I'd be ready. The next blow came quietly. Rachel called the HOA. I didn't hear the conversation, but I got the letter 2 days later, official looking, signed by a man named Brent, who once asked me to judge his chili cook-off. The notice cited unauthorized landscaping, non-permitted alterations to the garden unit, and use of unregistered surveillance devices. They wanted to find me. They wanted to wear me down. I wrote back. Politely. I explained that no alterations had occurred, that I had no surveillance devices, and that any landscaping was confined to my private designated lot per the original zoning agreement, still under review due to the disputed deed. Howard sent a second letter on my behalf, citing housing law and threatening counter-litigation if the HOA engaged in coordinated pressure tactics. I kept copies, logged dates. Nothing slipped through anymore. This wasn't just a fight for my house. It was a fight for reality. They had painted me as confused, delicate, fading. That was the story they needed to win. But I wasn't fading. I was documenting. Every look, every silence, every attempt to nudge me back into the dark. They tried one more trick. Late Friday night, I found a maintenance worker at my garden door. Young, apologetic, holding a clipboard. "Got an order to inspect the water heater?" he said. "Owner's request." I looked him in the eye. "Who signed the work order?" He checked. Rachel McKinnon?" "I didn't request it," I said. "And until the court decides, no one touches this unit without my consent." He stepped back, nervous. "Understood." I wrote down the time, his name, and the license plate of the van. Howard added it to the file. By the end of the week, they were quiet again. And I could feel it, like a shift in weather, subtle but sure. The fear had changed direction. They had underestimated the woman in the garden. Now they were starting to realize. She'd been awake the whole time. The letter from the Department of Elder Protection came on a Tuesday, stamped and sealed, addressed to me and no one else. I opened it at the kitchen table, fingers steady, tea untouched. Dear Ms. Loretta McKinnon, this letter confirms the opening of a formal investigation into your complaint filed on October 3rd. Your case has been assigned to investigator Laura Dent, who will contact you directly within 5 business days. All claims, including financial coercion, forgery, and non-consensual transfer of property, are now under review. You retain the right to legal counsel and protection under state elder law statutes. At the bottom was a sentence that didn't need to shout, "You are not alone in this process." I sat for a long time with that line. I didn't cry, but something inside me softened. Just a little. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't confused. I wasn't invisible. I was witnessed. I called Howard, gave him the case number. He was pleased. State recognition makes our job easier, he said. If Dent's half as good as I've heard, Rachel's going to have a very bad month. And she did. By Thursday, Laura Dent called me herself. Calm voice, direct questions. She didn't coddle. She didn't assume. She asked for dates, names, documents. I gave her everything. She asked if I felt safe. Yes, I said. Now I do. We scheduled a home visit for the following Monday. I didn't tell Graham or Rachel, but they felt it. That same day, Rachel stopped me in the driveway. She hadn't worn makeup. That alone told me something had cracked. I just want to know what you're trying to prove, she said. I stood beside my marigolds, gloved hands still dirty from the soil. That you lied, I said. That you took. That you counted on my silence. This is going to destroy Graham. He destroyed himself. Her mouth twitched, but she held her voice steady. Do you really want to air this all in court? Make Sadie watch her family fall apart? I looked at her evenly. She should see exactly what happens when someone gets used up and decides not to disappear. Rachel's mask slipped for a second, just long enough to reveal the real fear beneath all her polish. It wasn't about me ruining her. It was about me surviving her. That night, I watered the garden in silence. The air was cooling, the season shifting. From the kitchen window, I saw Graham in the hallway, pacing, on the phone. Talking low, agitated. Rachel sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on her knees, no control left in her posture. They were unraveling, and I was not. Monday came. Laura Dent arrived just after 9 a.m., clipboard in hand, badge on her jacket. She wore no smile, only purpose. I welcomed her in, offered tea. She declined. We sat at the small table, and she began her questions. How long have they lived here? When did access to your mail change? Can you describe the moment you signed the deed? I answered everything. Showed her the biscuit tin, the folders, the list of every subtle theft, my keys, my documents, my name. She said little, just nodded, wrote. When she finished, she looked at me directly. I believe you, she said, and I'll be requesting interviews with both Rachel and Graham. Will they know what I've told you? They'll know enough. I walked her to the gate. She paused. Most people don't come forward until it's too late, she said. You came just in time. Not just for me, I replied. For Sadie? She smiled faintly. Then that girl has someone very dangerous in her corner. And with that, she was gone. The next day, I found an envelope taped to my door. It wasn't from a lawyer. It wasn't official. Inside was a handwritten note, short, unsteady. Ma, I don't know how to fix this. I'm sorry. I was weak. I don't expect forgiveness. I just didn't know what it would cost. G. I folded it gently, placed it with the others. There'd be time for that reckoning later, but not now. Now I had a case file, a government investigator, a lawyer, a witness, and a voice that no longer shook when I used it. Let them circle. Let them doubt. Let them whisper about the quiet old woman with dirt under her nails and fire in her teeth. She wasn't done yet. The court date was set for December 14th. Howard called to confirm, voice calm, assured. We're first on the docket. Judge Merrill. Fair, but sharp. Not the kind of man who tolerates vague stories or missing signatures. Then we'll bring him both, I said. By then, the garden had gone brown, frost curling at the edges of my chrysanthemums. I left them there, untrimmed. Let the dead stay visible a while longer. It felt appropriate. The cease and desist was still in place. Rachel hadn't tried anything new. No more surprise maintenance men, no more forged forms slipped under the door. But silence wasn't peace. It was strategy. I knew that now. That Friday, she came down again. No clipboard, no mask, just her. She didn't wait for an invitation, just stepped inside, as if the walls still obeyed her. "You're really going through with this," she said. "Yes." "Do you know what you're starting?" "I know what I'm finishing." She sat, uninvited. Wore no makeup this time, no rings. "Graham's a wreck. He made choices. And you think dragging this through court is going to fix it?" "No, but it will stop it." She leaned forward, hands clasped. "I'll make you a deal," she said. "You drop the suit. We'll put you back on the house title, co-owner. We'll set up a trust in Sadie's name, let it all settle down." I stared at her. The offer was neat, professional, safe. But she hadn't come for peace. She'd come for control. "No," I said. "Why not? You'll get what you want." "I won't," I said quietly. "What I want is not to be managed." She bristled. "We were protecting the family. You were insulating your future. With my past." She shook her head. "You'll lose. We have signatures, records, witnesses." I smiled. "So do I." She stood. "You always had a way of making things harder than they needed to be. And you always had a way of confusing silence with consent." That stopped her. For once, she didn't have an answer. After she left, I made tea, sat in the rocking chair, listened to the creak of the wood under my hips, and thought of all the noise I hadn't made over the years. The apologies I'd swallowed, the forms I'd signed. No more. That weekend, Jack Landry came by. "I spoke to the investigator," he said. "Told her everything I heard. Gave her dates. I'll show up in court if I need to." "You will," I said. "And it'll matter." On Sunday, I sat down and wrote a letter. Not to Graham, not to Rachel, to Sadie. Just one page. I didn't tell her what they did. I told her what I did. That I fought when no one thought I could. That I spoke when they preferred I wouldn't. That I chose to be something other than grateful. I sealed the envelope, wrote her name in clean black ink, and placed it in the safe, on top of the new deed draft Howard had drawn up. Blank for now, but ready. The weather turned colder that night. The wind sharper. But I was ready for it. After all, winter was always quiet before the thaw. Court doesn't begin with a gavel or a speech. It begins with waiting. Fluorescent lights. Shoes squeaking on tile. The hush of strangers holding their breath. I sat at the petitioner's table beside Howard, my coat folded neatly on my lap. Across the aisle, Graham and Rachel, both dressed in expensive discomfort. Her hair pinned tight, his jaw locked. The bailiff called the case. McKinnon versus McKinnon, a title colder than our silences. Judge Merrill entered. Silver hair, straight back, eyes like steel under glass. Howard stood first. Laid out our case clearly. Deeds signed under misrepresentation. Financial access granted through forged authorization. Progressive isolation. Intentional removal of agency. He moved with precision. Calm, no drama. Then came the exhibits, the signature comparison, the affidavit, the letter from the bank, the neighbor's statement, the investigator's report from Elder Protection, submitted under seal. Each page passed without protest from the other table. Rachel's attorney tried to minimize. called it a series of misunderstandings. A family matter, mismanaged. No malice intended. But when Judge Merrill asked, "Did your client inform the petitioner she was signing away full rights to her property?" he paused. "Not in those exact words, Your Honor." I watched Merrill lean back, the weight of it settling in. Then he turned to me. "Ms. McKinnon, do you have anything to say before I issue a ruling?" I stood. "I raised my son in that house," I said. "I nursed my husband there when cancer hollowed him out. I buried my name in those walls, on bills, in meals, in every corner of that land. I didn't hand it over. It was taken, and I'm here to take it back." The room was silent. Even Rachel looked down. The judge nodded, picked up his pen. He ruled in my favor. The deed was to be nullified, returned to my sole ownership. Rachel and Graham were to be removed from all accounts, with financial oversight transferred to an independent fiduciary pending review. An investigation into the forged signature would proceed separately. I didn't cry, but my fingers curled tight around the seat, like holding on to solid ground. It was done. Outside, the air was bright and biting. I stood for a moment on the courthouse steps, coat tight, sun sharp in my eyes. Graham approached, alone. "I'm sorry, Ma," he said. "I know," I replied, "but that's not enough." He nodded, and then he did the hardest thing. He walked away. That evening, I returned home. My home. I turned the key myself, stepped into the quiet. The house smelled like age and heat and the faint memory of lemon polish. I opened the windows, let the air shift. In the closet, I found the red biscuit tin. I opened it one last time, removed the documents, filed them where they belonged, not in hiding, in order. Later, I sat at the garden table and watched the sun go down. Sadie came by after dark, no warning, just her, in a sweatshirt 2 sizes too big, hands shoved in her pockets. "Grandma," she said, "is it true?" Yes. She didn't ask for details. She just sat beside me. We watched the sky grow quiet. After a while, she said, "You didn't let them win." "I didn't let them finish." She smiled. "Good." Before she left, she handed me a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing, a little house, a tree, and a woman on the porch, rocking chair drawn in careful strokes. "She looks happy," I said. "She looks like you," she replied. And then she was gone. I sat with that picture long after the sky had gone black. They had tried to erase me, but I remembered who I was, and I wrote it down. If this story meant something to you, share it, save it. Let someone else know. Silence is not the same as peace.